going to make two medium short videos about the Minuet and Trio and also the theme and variations to fill out our sort of sonata cycle of forms. You know about the sonata, you know about changes of the sonata form in concerto. You've learned about the rondo. But Minuet and Trio is this third movement in the sonata cycle. And I'm glad that they're talking about it, but when I look at what's going on in the textbook or general explanations, the information is accurate and yet I think incomplete. And I feel like you could learn some facts about it and still not know mechanically what's going on. So let's start right there. A minuet is a dance in three. It's got a medium tempo. It's lively. It has certain characteristics that make it different from a waltz. And that's what this style of music is based on. So your minuet is going to be in three. And you'll hear that in the example that we play. A trio is actually just another minuet. And it's kind of funny where it gets this name, Minuet and Trio. It's I'm going to read it to you from classicalmusic.com where they answer this, and its naming structure comes from an antiquated practice that they had back when sort of minuets and trios were used as dance music. So here's what it says. It says in Baroque courtly entertainments, so pre-classical, especially in France, it was common to provide dances in pairs that could be alternated to avoid like monotony of repetition of the music. So we would have a minuet and another minuet, basically, that would could alternate these back and forth. So what happened is in the second minuet, it says changes in scoring could heighten the contrast. So a string-dominated four-part minuet could be followed by a lighter dance for, say, three wind instruments or a trio. And so that became a custom where you'd have the music would be primarily, the first minuet would be dominated by one kind of instrumentation. And then in the second minuet or the alternating dance, for contrast, they would lighten or change the instrumentation often to be a trio of instruments. And that doesn't mean only the trio would play, but they would be the feature. And so it was a accentuating contrast. That doesn't mean all minuet and trios written after that are like that. Many of them are, in fact, most of them are not. However, the naming structure still happened. So when we look at your textbook and it says, let's see if I can get this on the camera. It says, you're going to hear a minuet with this form and then a trio and then a minuet that looks a lot smaller. Really what we're talking about is a minuet, right? It's lively dance in three, another minuet with different music for contrast. And then it's going to go back and do an abbreviated form of the original minuet for balance, okay, for rounding out the form. And I'm going to try and show you mechanically how that works. So here's the form that they put for the minuet. And it's kind of confusing. It's like AAB, A prime, AAB, A prime. But really what's going on is this. Now, if you think of these as sections, okay, and maybe I'll use some contrasting. So this is the first section. This is all inside a single minuet, okay? And then the second section. What we would do is we'd have the A theme or material in the first section, and these dots in musical notation mean to repeat. So we would do the whole of the A or beginning half of the minuet. Then we go back and repeat it again, which is how you get A and A, okay? Then we would do the second section. Now the second section actually is not necessarily longer, can be a little bit longer, but not hugely so. Usually the contrasting material of the second section, which we'll call B, just to distinguish here, is relatively short. And then the balance of that section is rounded out for material in the original A part, okay? Sometimes in early and more abbreviated minuets and these kind of dance forms, right? This would actually just be half, the back half of this. And we'll see that actually in the Mozart theme and variations that we'll be doing in a video. But in this case, actually, it's this modified A is almost the entirety of this, but just changed somewhat. So this is actually quite long, right? We call this form of a beginning section and an end section binary for the two parts that it is. In the classical period, it had evolved into, it was fashionable to have the back part of your second section to have material from the A section to balance it out and recall where we were originally. They called this a rounded binary because the end of the second section rounds out and remembers the stuff from the beginning. Okay, and then you repeat that again. So here we have A section, right? And then it repeated again. And then this BA is an entire section of its own right there, right? And oops, I think I wrote this out wrong. And then it says in the book, BA, BA, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And what happens is basically they're just repeating this section again. Okay. So that's how Minuet works. It has two sections, the first section and the second section, and it's called binary because it has two parts. This section is dominated by A material. It has sort of a beginning recognizable theme and then stuff that happens that will repeat again. Then you'll have a contrasting second section, which has different material. And in the classical period, we have this rounded binary concept where the back half of the second section is simply material from here. Now, in this case, it's virtually the same length as this part right here, but it has modifications and differences, and this forms the second section. So first repeat there of this section. This whole thing is just a section, and then it's repeat as well. Incidentally, if we were in the Baroque period, it would look like this. The Baroque period would have A music and then B music. And rather than having repeating materials back here, and this is true for both, we start in a home key or tonality. And then by the time we get to here, we've gone to a different place, different key. And there's patterns for that. That we would learn if we were in music theory. And then the job is to get us back to the home again by the time we go there. So the Baroque music wouldn't repeat music from the first half, but it would start in the home key. It would be in a different away key. And then by the time it got down to here, it would be back home again and then do a final statement or section in the home key. So it's simulating in terms of tonality and large scale functions in our ear, the same sort of return and departure that this has. This is just more explicit because it actually quotes material from there. Okay, trio is another minuet. It's going to do the same thing. Now, the reason in your book that it has this abbreviated minuet on the last time is because on the repeat, they literally play this music and then they play this music and then they go back and play this music again. But the last time they do it, they don't do the repeat. So they just go A and then B with the A at the end. And that's why it's shorter, because they don't repeat here and they don't repeat there. On the last section of the Minuet and Trio, as in many pieces, when you go back and sort of encore the beginning part, they just don't do the repeats. All right, that being said, now we're going to switch over to a share of screen right now, and I'm going to see if we can trick. Yeah, we can. I think the last one where I pitch shifted this a little bit worked pretty well. Google has not, YouTube has not said no. Okay, so you're going to watch this in real time with me. This whole section here is A. Okay, and this is the Emperor Quartet, given that name as a nickname by Haydn. That's in your book, and you'll hear the opening head motive right here, and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's easy to remember. Then somewhere it'll get a little bit messy and you'll lose track of it. Then you'll hear it go blum, 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 blum. There'll be another recognizable part right about here. It'll drive to a cadence. You'll go, where are we? But then if you're paying attention, after this point, you'll hear it start up again. And if you look at these waveforms closely, if you want to, they're virtually the same. I mean, they're slightly different because live performance yields different things, but it's literally a repeat. Okay, so let's go. Here we go. the A section. You should follow along your listening guide. I'm going to point here because it's graphic as we go along. All right. And some more recognizable stuff. And here's the repeat. It's exactly the same. We're just doing this part again. In that second part of the A section, right? Now, you're going to go to minor, and you're going to get contrasting. But you'll hear this come back in just a second, right? Now. But it is different and extended and made interesting. You can recognize that back half being played right there. Now we're going to repeat here again. And so this is the repeat of the section, and we're right here. Okay, that's the end of the minuet. And now we would be going on to the trio, okay, which is basically a second minuet. And then when we're done that, we'd come back to the first minuet, play this, but don't do the repeat. Play this and don't do the repeat. Now, I'm not going to go through the entirety of that right now because it's up, you understand the nuts and bolts of it now. You can follow along this video and see how, because the waveforms look the same and I'm pointing it out, how that works mechanically. It's really interesting when you think about it. We have this longer, 4.5, 5 minute form made up of these tiny little dances that are made up of tiny little phrases, right? Now there's a lot more under the hood to make sure the mechanics of the surface music works out, of course. It's not to diminish the creation, but I guess what I'm saying is, like we've said all along in this unit, if you learn to hear the themes, right, you can follow along in the music very comfortably, even if you don't know note for note exactly where you are, because it does get a little interesting after there, I'd say, right? There's variation, there's less defined hearable things. There are clear cadences or ends of phrases. You can hear things start up on the repeats again, or returns of material, or changes in tonality. It can become a very comprehensible and easy to follow piece of music, even without words, even without, for the longer duration. And that's pretty cool, actually, as a skill. So, for your assignment, you'll be listening through all of this and trying to track those things and hear them. And I think we'll end this here. You now understand the nuts and bolts. Minuets are dances in three. Trios are just a second dance in three that has an archaic name of naming the second trio, because they'd rejigger the instrumentation, often feature a smaller number of instruments like a trio. It comes from Baroque dances that they used to do, especially in France. Dancing was really, really big there in the courtly circles. And it's really a binary, in other words, two-part section where you repeat this and then repeat that. And then you do another trio or another minuet at the end of the trio, and then you come back. All right. Okay.